All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes Live. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Friday. I love Friday for a lot of reasons. Love those weekends. Really love those weekends in the fall where we get to move on to some college football the next day. But this is especially good Friday because we only have 43 days left until Texas football. And I just got to pick out my Red River Shootout tickets. Sitting 2 rows up in the exact same section, exact same seats we had last year for the 49-0 massacre of the Oklahoma Sooners. So we're excited about that. Check us out on Twitter at Horn Takes. Check us out on TikTok at Horn Takes. Do a lot of content on TikTok. I do videos. Just pick up the phone, set it in the stand, and do some videos. And then I also put a lot of clips of the show on TikTok. Obviously, we're on YouTube at Horn Takes. We'll continue to get better at the content. We'll try to get some guests. Trying to build a network takes a little bit of time. Today, we're going to talk about those big guys. Those big humans is my favorite position group, without a doubt. The big guys don't get enough love, so we're going to praise them today. Before we get into that, little update on recruiting. Texas gets a commitment from 4-star defensive lineman DeAndre Robinson out of Orlando, Florida. This is a really big kid, big body, 6'4", 315 pounds. Big is great, but what I really like about this dude is he can move. I was watching his film a little bit this morning, and man, they line him up. They line him up on the edge a lot, and he gets off the edge pretty well for a guy that's 6'4", 315 pounds. I don't know that you can tell a whole lot about his, run stopping ability being that big at that level. He plays well behind his pads, uses his leverage, all those things, but he's obviously playing against guys that are not him. But what I really did like about his film, I think he's got a really good football IQ. There's a lot of instances where he's spinning out of double teams, spinning back against double teams. A lot of guys try to go with double teams. I don't know why. I think they feel like they can outrun the double team and then manage to get back in the play. But really all they're doing is running themselves out of the play. Not big DeAndre Robinson. He's been taught well or just has instincts for it. As soon as he feels that double team, he's spinning back against it or grabbing grass between it, which is, those are tough things to do. It's the easy way out is to just keep running with those blocks. It's tough to spin against them. It's tough to try to split them. He does those things, does them well. A couple things I saw. Another thing I saw that, really got me excited about him and his IQ and his, just his understanding of the game was, saw a lot of instances where guards or tackles were pulling. He just tucks in right behind them, stays square to the line of scrimmage, rides that down right into the play. And that, again, is something that's, a lot of guys don't get it. A lot of guys, when they don't get blocked, they just go straight up the field, and that creates a big running lane. So I think Texas got a good one. He's definitely got a body that can add more weight and not be out of shape, not be in a position where he can't continue to do the things that he can do today. So that's the one big commitment that Texas got this week. We'll run down again, who we think Texas is in good shape with at this point. You still got Wardell Mack in the mix. He's a 4-star cornerback out of Marrero, Louisiana. He's got visits to LSU and Florida. Looks like he wants to make a decision before the season starts. I haven't heard a lot about him since the big recruiting weekend a few weekends ago. Brandon Baker, the big 5-star offensive tackle out of Mater D in California. I think this one's going to boil down to a Texas and Oregon conflict. It'd be really good if Texas could snag him. Texas has had a not a light in terms of talent, just light in terms of bodies, offensive line recruiting class to this point in the 2024 class. A lot of the other really highly touted sort of blue chip tackles have already committed to other schools. I think Brandon Baker would be a really big get for Texas if they can pull that off. Everything I've read said he really likes Texas. So in fact, you kind of get the sense that Texas is in the lead of this one. You just never know with these kids, but that's what it kind of seems like to me. Colin Simmons, 5-star edge out of Duncanville. I don't need to tell. If you follow recruiting, we don't need to tell you about that guy. He's visiting A&M and LSU late in July. And he tweeted the other day that a decision date is coming soon. And I think what he meant, but a lot of people took that different ways. I think what he meant by that was, I'm going to tell you guys when I'm committing soon. Not that I will be committing soon, but who knows? I kind of feel like he's going to be a guy that goes down to signing day. I can see it both ways. I think he really likes Texas, but I think he's still, like a lot of Texas fans are, kind of cautiously optimistic about Texas. Like he wants to see Texas go out on the field this year and really have a really good season. And I think, we said it last week on the show, I think Texas does that. He's a guy that's going to end up at Texas. And I think a lot of these guys that maybe really like Texas but decided to go with Georgia, Florida, LSU, Alabama, A&M, Oklahoma even. Those are kind of the, those are going to be the traditional recruiting battles right there for Texas going forward. But I think they might have an opportunity to flip some of those guys even. We all get excited about commits, but we all know it doesn't really matter till they sign their name on that dotted line. Ryan Wingo, it's kind of gone quiet with him. 5-star wide receiver out of St. Louis, Missouri. A lot of hype about him coming out of that recruiting weekend. And he started getting crystal balls to Texas, but we haven't heard much about Ryan Wingo, so I don't know what any of that means. I think a lot of these kids just try to play it close to the vest, and a lot of these kids probably want to, maintain their privacy to some extent, so maybe that's what that's about. Still got Kobe Black out there, a 5-star cornerback out of Texas, Waco, Texas. Corian Gibson's a guy, 4-star cornerback out of Lancaster, Texas. He announces tomorrow. Not sure on the time. This one looks like it's been a Clemson versus Texas thing for quite a bit now. And depending on which sites you look at and who's reporting you listen to, it could go either way. There's a saying in the recruiting industry that someone got fonged. Wilt Fong, he's supposedly a national recruiter, real plugged in. National recruiting analyst, real plugged in. He just came out recently, I think earlier this morning or last night, saying Clemson. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. He announces tomorrow. The interesting thing about Corian Gibson is big-time friends with Jordan Johnson Rubel, Texas commit. They grew up together. And I probably butchered that name, and if I did, I apologize. Another guy is Zena Umeozulu, 4-star edge out of Allen, Texas. He just picked up a crystal ball this morning for Texas. So, again, we get excited about these commits. We want to see what the recruiting class looks like. We wish a commit was actually a commit, but it's not always a commit. It's definitely not a sign. On a national level, right now, today, this second, this class is ranked 19th with 15 commits. 90.29 average star rating. So in 2022, they were 5th in the country and had 91.17 average star rating. 2023, they were 3rd in the country, had 92.96 average star rating. So they're hovering right around in there. And there's a lot of, I think the closer we get to signing day, the more highly rated a lot of these prospects will be. Offensive line. For those of you that don't know, I played offensive line in high school. I played offensive line in college. I can totally appreciate how hard it is to be an offensive lineman. I can totally appreciate how underappreciated it is to be an offensive lineman. So these offensive linemen are my spirit animals. Texas is returning all 5 starters off of their offensive line last year. An offensive line that, it wasn't a great offensive line last year, but they were pretty good, and they had improved a bunch from the year before. I kind of expect them to take another step. They were really good pass blocking last year and just so run blocking. I really expect them to take that next step. And again, they may not be great next year, but if they can just continue to improve in the run blocking, man, I think Texas has a chance to have a really, really good offense next year. And obviously returning all 5 starters is big time for an offensive line. You don't see it that often, and usually when you do, they are able to put in a pretty good year and be a strength for the team. This offensive line is really strong on the outside. Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, Christian Jones at right tackle. But they kind of struggled up the middle last season, especially in the run game. This offensive line last year was fundamentally sound. They were doing the right things. They just, in the middle, weren't physical enough all the time to finish, right? So I saw a graph the other day, and it was done by, I don't even remember who it was done by, some other group that sits out there and analyzes college football film and gives offensive lines grades. But the Texas offensive line was in the top 10 in the country for the lowest percentage of missed assignments. So they weren't missing assignments. When things failed, it was really a physical thing. I've been really excited ever since Steve Sarkisian got to Texas because of his focus. One of the first things he said is, when he got to Texas and they started talking to him about recruiting and his team and what it needed to look like to be successful, he started talking about both sides of the line of scrimmage, but he really focused on the offensive line. He said, we need bigger guys. We need big humans. Prior to Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood, Chuck Strong, and Tom Herman really didn't focus so much on the offensive line. Lots of good recruiting classes, and we've talked about this before on the show. Everybody always likes to say Texas does less with more, and Texas has always had these highly recruited or highly regarded recruiting classes, highly rated recruiting classes, and that's true. They have had, even during the decade of just absolute shit with Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, they did have some really good recruiting classes, but what they did not do is recruit in the trenches at all. Between Strong and Herman, they signed 50 offensive and defensive line commits between 2014 and 2020. So that's 7 per class across the offensive line and the defensive line. Sark already has 27 signed through 3 cycles. So he is well on pace to to just smash that. And they're very selective about who they take. They're not just grabbing guys with stars next to their names. They're grabbing guys that they feel like have the bodies that can come in and compete immediately. And they have the skill set they're looking for to come in and compete immediately. 5 guys coming back. This is a 2 deep that is, 5 starters coming back. Lots of guys coming back. This is a really, really young but really talented 2 deep for the University of Texas. Christian Jones is a senior, redshirt senior. Jake Majors is a junior. Hayden Connors a junior. And those are the only 3 upperclassmen in this 2 deep. I think this offensive line is really anchored by freshman All-American Kelvin Banks. He's the number 30 player in his class. Came in immediately, started immediately at the University of Texas. I think he turned out better than any of us could hope for. I wouldn't call myself like a guru, and I wouldn't say like I know everything about playing offensive line, but I watched a lot. I wouldn't watch a lot. I watched what was available. I watched what was available for film on these guys. And coming in, man, Kelvin Banks looked really good. DJ Campbell looked really good. Kid out of Duncanville. In fact, DJ Campbell's more highly rated than Kelvin Banks Jr. But a lot of these guys in that class that came in 2022 really, really looked like they could come in and play early. Pretty sure Kelvin Banks is a future first-round draft pick, and he might be a future overall number 1. That's how good he is. It all just kind of depends on the needs of the team that's drafted number 1 at that time. But I think he's that type of talent. Kelvin Banks played against 4 number 1 draft picks at edge last year. Gave up 0 sacks and had 0 holding penalties. As a true freshman. I mean, that's just absolutely unbelievable. So you look at the guys coming back. You look at what the offensive line may look like this year. Obviously, Kelvin Banks is going to be that left tackle. Hayden Connors got that left guard position nailed down. Center is a kind of an interesting one to me. Jake Majors has been the center for the last couple of years at Texas. But I think Cole Hudson, who played right guard last season, who's also a member of that 2022 recruiting class, there's been a lot of discussion about him taking some center reps. And then you look at that right guard position, there's a lot of discussion about DJ Campbell. If you go back to before the spring game, before DJ Campbell got hurt this spring in spring practice, lots of buzz about DJ Campbell really, really pushing for a starting position. Hurts his hand, I think it was his hand, had surgery on his hand, missed the spring game, missed most of spring practice. But again, just a really, really talented kid. And then you got Christian Jones holding down that right tackle position. And man, I'll say it again, what an outstanding story for Christian Jones and Kyle Flood and whoever assists Kyle Flood with that offensive line. Christian Jones was a guy that's been at Texas for a long time, redshirt senior. He's a guy that's had to play a lot, but he hasn't been good. They just haven't had good players along the offensive line. So he's had some experience before last season. And the season before, he was just awful. And last year, he's not Kelvin Banks Jr., but he had a really good season. And I think, you got to credit, everybody wants to credit the coaching staff for that development, and I think that's fair. That's what those guys are there to do. They're there to teach these guys. They're there to push these guys to become stronger and quicker and develop better technique. But you got to give Christian Jones some credit, too. He could have easily packed it in, and he took a lot of heat from Texas fans in 2021. And all he did between 2021 and 2022 was become a really, really solid right tackle. I don't know if he'll get drafted. I think he may wind up with an NFL team, get an opportunity to go to a camp, and it would not surprise me one bit if he figured out a way to make a team. He's a big kid. He's really, again, developed. So it'll be interesting to see. Your starters coming back again are Banks, Connor, Jake Majors, Cole Hudson at right guard, and then Christian Jones at right tackle. But it'll be interesting to see how that sort of right guard center dynamic plays out. I think we'll kind of see we'll see how it's going to play out pretty quickly in that Rice game. The returning starting five, and this is where Texas has gotten so much better. Texas used to recruit these offensive linemen that weighed like 270 pounds, 280 pounds. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why you would recruit projects. And I'm not saying you can't go out and recruit some projects and have some success there. But there's just tons of guys out there that are already big enough to come play today. You know, other schools aren't recruiting projects. Other schools are recruiting, well, they're recruiting projects, but they're recruiting big-ass projects. They're not recruiting physical projects. They're recruiting, like, fundamental and technique projects. But now you got guys, this offensive line averages 320 pounds. The starting five we might end up with, if Cole Hudson to center works out and if DJ Campbell works out at that right guard position, that one's close to averaging 330 pounds. And then you look at the next three guys that are probably the next three guys in, like the next three guys up, right? You got Cameron Williams, a sophomore at tackle. Neto Umeozulu, it's a redshirt freshman at guard. And then Connor Robertson, redshirt freshman at center. A lot of these interior guys can play center or guard. Those are some big dudes. Cameron Williams weighs like 365 pounds. He's like 6'6", 365 pounds. Umeozulu is a big guy at like 330 pounds. Connor Robertson's a baby. I think he's 315, 318, something like that. But you look at that two deep, and 6 of the 7 guys that came in that really awesome, really late, really almost seemed thrown together 2022 class are in the two deep. So that tells me that Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian got it right with who they brought in. A lot of upperclassmen left because they knew they weren't playing, and a lot of those upperclassmen went to some big programs. The only one of that group that just hasn't, and I don't know what the deal is, hasn't figured it out yet is Malik Ogbo. And he's another huge body, 350-pound guy. True freshman Peyton Kirkland out of Florida, getting a lot of reps at left tackle. Looks like he'll crack the two deep. So there's your names to know on the offensive line. I think as we head into this 2023 football season, I expect this offensive line to maybe not be great, but I expect them to be better than they were last year. And better than they were last year is probably going to be really, really damn good. You know, you could talk about all the skill guys that Texas has, and we have. got a really highly rated quarterback. You got a lot of great running backs sitting back there that can tote the rock. You got a wide receiver core that is arguably the best in the country. Arguably the best. I'm not saying it is the best. Definitely a top 5 unit in the country. But all that doesn't matter if you can't block people. The only time you can just win with skill is really junior high, freshman, JV football. Once you start to get to even varsity football, if you don't have guys blocking well for people, you're not going to get the desired results. So I'm super excited to see what this bunch can do this year. I think they're going to be a strength of this offense. Maybe not the strength, but I think they're going to be a strength. We saw it a lot towards the end of last year where the passing game just wasn't working out. Quinn Ewers was struggling. The receivers were struggling to catch the ball. Receivers were struggling to get open. A lot of teams had kind of thought we can't let these guys get behind us. So that, they backed off a little bit. And so what Steve Sarkisian had to do last year in the Kansas game, in the Baylor game, was really rely on that offensive line. He did it early in the Oklahoma State game too, and he just didn't do it in the second half. And they were able to go out and win Texas games. And we really haven't seen a Texas team be able to do that in a long time. Be in situations where the defense knows they're fixing to run the ball and be able to make some space and pick up first downs and create big plays in the running game. It's not Georgia yet, and it's not Alabama yet, not Ohio State yet, but it's a lot better than it used to be. So I think this offensive line is gonna continue to improve. I think having a year together is big. Having another year in the system to develop off-season, weight training, agility training, just being around the coaches for another season, it's going to pay off huge. I think it's going to be a really good offensive line. Let's talk about week 4 opponent, Baylor Bears. It's a Big 12 road opener for Texas. It's a Big 12 opener for Texas if they're going on the road to Waco. Texas won last season 38-27 down in Austin. Again, that was the last regular season game of the season for the Texas Longhorns, and we just kind of mentioned it. Probably the first time in Sark's tenure at Texas that Texas was able to just physically smother another Big 12 team in the second half. We've seen a lot of really good first halves out of Steve Sarkisian's teams at Texas, and then the second halves, in a lot of cases, haven't been very good. And we saw a little bit of that last year, but we saw much more of the opposite, which was the team was able to play in the second half and figure out ways to win, stop opposing offenses, and impose their will offensively, especially in the run game. I think it was a big moment for not only the players, not only that offensive line, not only that football team, but for Steve Sarkisian too. I think he can now trust that they can lean on the running game, and it doesn't have to be, it's okay to get 3 or 4 yards of carry, which is crazy saying that because Texas averaged much more than 3 or 4 yards of carry last season. Anyway, back to Baylor, 6-7 in 2022, 4-5 in the Big 12. They played pretty well down the stretch. They damn near got TCU. What a wild game that was. If you don't remember, that was the game that Baylor controlled that game for much of the game, and then TCU got back in it, found a way to get down the field late, didn't have a timeout, and managed to get the kicking team on the field in, I think it was like 16 seconds, 17 seconds, and kicked a pretty long field goal to win that game. So Baylor almost knocked TCU off. And then they came in and had a pretty good start against Texas. Caused some turnovers. We're making it really tough on Quinn Ewers. We're in the game, and then right after that Ewers fumble that led to a touchdown for Baylor, they scooped it and scored. Texas didn't throw another pass and absolutely ran the ball down Baylor's throat for the rest of the fourth quarter. So they played pretty well, but they're only returning 9 guys off that team, 4 on offense, 5 on defense. That's not exactly where you want to be if you're any team. Not where you want to be if you're the Baylor Bears, coming off a season that just, really wasn't all that impressive. Key returns on offense, you got Blake Shapen, quarterback. He was around 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Not awesome, but not bad either. But he's kind of the only one. Key returns on defense, you got Gabe Hall, Garmin Randolph on the edge. They had 10 sacks in between them. Baylor lost a lot on the offense. They lost Titus Swin, 1,000-yard running back. Ben Sims, tight end that had 300 or 400 yards receiving, 3 touchdown catches. All the O-line up the middle. They lost the center and both guards. So that's going to be tough. You never want to be in a situation where you're having to replace that many guys on the offensive line. On defense, they lost the whole back end of the defense. Four defensive backs gone. We've talked predictions in these games, and I'm not going to do like a score prediction till the game week, but I feel like this is a game that Texas should win easily. I feel like position-wise, there's not a place that Texas isn't better than Baylor. So we're going to call for Texas after week 4 to be 3-1 at the worst. Just a few random things to talk about college football-wise. SEC Media Days were this last week. A lot of controversy about who the real UT is. Twitter turned into a huge fight about the real UT. I don't. Just call us Texas. I don't care about UT. Y'all can have UT. Y'all can be UT, Tennessee fans. But we find out that the 2024 SEC Media Days are going to be in Dallas. And immediately Aggies heads explode around the country. Conspiracy theories about how the SEC is going to start bowing down to Texas. It's got to be tough to be an Aggie. It really does, man, because that's all they think about is Texas. All they think about is what they don't have and what Texas does have and how they're being slighted by the SEC. They cried like babies when the announcement came out a couple years ago that Texas was joining the SEC. Started whining about gentlemen's agreements, and it's interesting because you got the ones that whine, and then you got the ones that say really stupid shit like Texas has got to follow our coattails everywhere. Da 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 da. No, bro, they don't. So I thought that was interesting. I wonder if at some point the Aggies are just gonna stop worrying about Texas and just worry about not being 5-7. I wonder if at some point they just say it is what it is. And the thing is, I don't think the SEC is doing. I think it makes sense for the SEC to move some things around. I don't. I know they were in Nashville this year. I don't know if the SEC media days move around typically. My assumption is they probably do. And so if that's the case, why not bring that to Texas? Why not bring that to the west side of the conference where you've now got Oklahoma, you've got Texas, you've got Texas A&M. To a lesser extent, you've got LSU, Arkansas. Why not bring that to a different part of the country and sort of get some exposure for your conference in a different part of the country? That just makes good business sense. We've had some more horns down nonsense. I don't know who this. I don't know how it happened. I don't know much about the backstory, but apparently a lot of stuff came out about horns down and how it's going to be penalized. And then there was some guy talking about the spirit of the horns down matters. You know, if you do a horns down directly in a player's face, that's taunting. If you do it with your teammates, it's not taunting. It shouldn't be a penalty. I have no idea who this guy was, but again, Twitter blows up, all the social medias blow up. Everybody's crying about, Texas supposedly crying about horns down. I'm gonna let you guys on a little secret. No Texas fans give a flying fuck about you morons running around doing the horns down. It's one of those things that you talk about because it is so weird to you. Like I was watching Texas A&M and Arkansas play last year, and they're panning the crowd, and there's people doing horns down. Almost any Big 12 game now that Texas isn't even involved in, they'll pan the crowd, and there'll be people doing the horns down. And in a lot of these schools' cases, they have their own little hand sign that they've been doing forever. And to me, that is just really odd. I totally get it if you're playing Texas. Like, horns down it, man. That's the time to do it. I can't remember the season it was, but it was back in the days of the Big 12, back in the days of, when Oklahoma really started to come on in the Big 12. I want to say it was 2003. Big 12 championship game, Kansas State against Oklahoma. Kansas State is absolutely kicking the shit out of Oklahoma. And they pan the crowd, and there's a bunch of OU fans doing the horns down. Why are you thinking about Texas in a game that you're not playing Texas? And not only that, but you're getting your ass stomped. It's just odd to me. And I think it's odd to all Texas fans. And I think it's really odd now that you're starting to see that reaction out of SEC schools that, traditionally, at least recently, Texas hasn't had a lot of experience with. Texas played a few SEC teams, in the last, I don't know what, like couple of decades, but not all of them. So it's really kind of weird for all these SEC teams to be jumping on this horns down bandwagon. Again, if you're playing Texas and you horn down it, I get it, man. Arkansas fans, man, I get it. Y'all hate Texas. So again, going back to caring, like Texas fans don't care. If y'all want to horns down. We're going to call you out for looking like dumbasses though. And y'all got to just, I mean, if people are acting like jackasses, reasonable people are going to say, man, you're acting like a jackass. And busting a horns down when you're not playing Texas is like the epitome of jackassery. So that's not crying about it. And we don't want anybody to get a penalty for it. Like, I don't care. I don't think a Texas fan has ever said that needs to be a penalty. I think what Texas fans said was, hey, we just got a penalty for doing a hand sign. Yet the entire conference, and we're talking Big 12 now, the entire conference is constantly, their players are constantly throwing horns down. That's all that's about. Call the game, or call it fairly, right? Which again, I think probably 95% of Texas fans couldn't give two fucks less if hand signs go unpenalized. I was kind of hoping moving to the SEC that the SEC schools would be secure enough in themselves and be secure enough in their, their dominance as SEC programs that horns down shit would just kind of die off. And really, the only people you'd see doing that are the retards in the Big 12 still. Texas Tech fans. Oklahoma State fans. Iowa State fans. Which, by the way, in 2024, you will be able to tune into a Big 12 game and you will see fans doing horns down. It's going to happen. There's been a lot of chirping from Texas Tech fans lately. Texas Tech fans have been sort of outside of their heads with how amazing their program is. And look, Joey McGuire's coming there and had a decent season last year. They beat Texas last year. They beat Oklahoma last year. It's the first time that has ever happened in the history of Texas Tech football that they beat both of those schools in the same season. So I think there's a lot for Texas Tech fans to be excited about. I think Joey McGuire has the town excited. For those of y'all that don't know, I live in Lubbock, so I get to listen and live this shit every single day. They're excited. The school is investing in the stadium, investing in the facilities. Joey McGuire's this rah-rah guy that, I think players just like to play for him. I've said that multiple times. I think the key to Joey McGuire being successful back in his high school coaching days was he got kids fired up, and he's doing the same thing at Tech. And I think because of that excitement, because of some of the success they were able to have last year, they're kind of in a position now where they're looking at some guys from a recruiting perspective, and they're getting some attention from some guys from a recruiting perspective rather, that they wouldn't normally get a lot of attention from. And the key guy we're talking about is Micah Hudson, 5-star wide receiver out of Texas. I believe his stepfather played at Texas Tech. So he's got like that family connection. But there's a lot of buzz about, Micah Hudson is going to wind up at Tech. And I think right now we're looking at a Texas Tech-Texas battle, but I don't even know how much of a battle it really is. Depending on what you read, again, it's almost a foregone conclusion that he's going to be a Texas Tech Red Raider. So Texas fans, Texas Tech fans are excited about that, and they start to get real chippy and real stupid on the interwebs, on the social media. The recruiting, you've probably seen this, the recruiting landscape of Texas is changing, and all of these really great Texas football players are starting to lean towards going out to Texas Tech. And at the time that this moron said this, I don't know who he is, some dude on Twitter. Tech was actually ahead of Texas in the recruiting rankings. It was back before a lot of these recent commits, in the last 2-3 weeks for Texas. And they were ahead by quite a bit. But yeah, the recruiting landscape is changing in Texas. And then, of course, it's not changing. You're in the lead for one guy. And now you look at it, and Texas is at 19 with 3 less commits, which is 11 spots higher than Texas Tech. They've got a two-star average rating ahead of Texas Tech, or 2-point average ahead of Texas Tech at this point. And there's still a lot of sort of thoroughbred type guys that Texas is in really good shape for. So Texas Tech's recruiting is going to continue to go back down to where it used to be. And Texas is just going to keep going up to where it used to be. But it's just funny to see. It's just funny to see like this false bravado, this false sense of, I don't know what you call it, out of these Tech fans. And then, of course, you got their athletic department. Got the Tech athletic director, Kirby Hocutt, saying that Texas is scared to play Tech, and then the ball is in their court once they move to the SEC. Kind of the same bullshit you saw out of Mike Gundy at the Big 12 media days, trying to make it seem like, you know, he's ready to play Oklahoma at any time, even though he's 3-15 against Oklahoma since they've joined the Big 12. Or he's 3-15 against Oklahoma since becoming the head coach at Oklahoma State. And then you look at Texas's record against Texas Tech. Overall, it's 54-18. So Texas has won 75% of the games against Tech historically. Texas has more wins since they've been in the Big 12 than Texas Tech has all time against Texas. Since joining the Big 12, Texas has beaten Texas Tech 20 times. And all time in history, Texas Tech has beat Texas 18 times. So no Kirby Hocutt, no Texas Tech fans, no Red Raiders. Texas is not afraid of Texas Tech. You know, congratulations on your win last year. It happens. You can't win them all, but you can win 75% of them. The reality for Tech is this is just all sour grapes. It's the same shit we've been seeing for forever out of Tech people, Tech administration, Tech fans. They cannot make their own way. And they're pissed off that the last team's coattails they had to follow, they had to ride on, are now leaving the conference. There was a distinct change in the way Texas Tech fans interacted with Texas fans the moment Texas A&M left the Big 12. The big rivalry in Texas for Texas Tech has not historically been Texas, or the team that we hate so bad has not historically been Texas. I'm not saying there was a lot of love between Texas Tech and Texas, but back in the day when A&M was still in the Big 12 and Texas Tech started to have a lot of success against Texas A&M in the Big 12, that was a fierce rivalry. Texas Tech fans tore down their goalposts in Lubbock and shoved it into the visiting stands at Jones Stadium after an upset win over A&M. They hate them some Aggies, or used to hate them some Aggies. And then the Aggies left, so they pointed all that ire at Texas. And despite all of that, Texas fans still didn't give a shit about Texas Tech fans. University of Texas still doesn't give a shit about Texas Tech. So that's what this is all about. They've been manufacturing this hate and manufacturing this rivalry between Texas ever since A&M left, and now Texas is leaving, and they're not going to have that anymore. They're not going to have any more in-state rivals left. Rivals. Texas Tech's not going to have any more in-state matchups that anybody in the state of Texas gives two shits about besides TCU fans and Texas Tech fans. The rest of the nation is going to forget that Texas Tech even has a football team. Because the only time the rest of the nation cared about Texas Tech is when they would somehow figure out a way to beat Texas. They would somehow figure out a way to beat Oklahoma. They would somehow figure out a way to beat Nebraska. Back in the day when Nebraska was good in the early days of the Big 12. And now all that's gone. They're going to become more irrelevant than they've been historically because there's just no interesting matchups anymore. And I get why they would be pissed about that. But there's nothing they can do about it except lash out and say stupid shit on the internet about how Texas is scared. I would expect that from a fan. Texas is scared to play us. Like, I think that's within the realm of fandom talk. Like, fans say dumb stuff. That's why we're called fans, right? It shouldn't be shocking for anybody that a fan would say something really stupid about their football team or about a football team they hate. That's what fans do. Fan is short for fanatic. Fanatics do fanatical stuff, and fanatical stuff is usually pretty freaking stupid. But for the athletic director at the university, at Texas Tech University to say that Texas is afraid to play Texas so he can kind of rally his troops, he's not stupid. Kirby Hokut's not stupid. He sees what's happening. He sees that after this season, he doesn't have any marquee matchups to sell at home. He's going to have to go out of conference to try to get people excited about paying $285 to have season tickets at Jones Stadium. It probably explains that Oregon game. And I don't know what Texas Tech did to get Oregon to come to Lubbock. And I don't even know if that's a home and home. I assume it is. If he was able to pull off just a home game with Oregon, kudos to Kirby Hokut, or shame on you, Oregon, because you're not very good at negotiations. But he's going to have to do that like every single year now. Just to keep the fan base excited. Or they're going to have to figure out a way to win the Big 12. And I think if they can do that, maybe they don't have to have a lot of those marquee matchups, and maybe they are able to sort of pave their own way in the new Big 12. But even their best football teams in the past have not managed to be able to win the Big 12. And I'm talking some teams that were ranked in the top 5 and the top 10. Had some really big wins. Weren't able to figure out a way to win the Big 12. So I don't know that you're going to see them compete in the Big 12, the new Big 12. We'll see. But the moral of the story is lashing out the way their fan base has and lashing out the way their athletic director has. That's what people do when they don't have any control over a situation. The only thing they have control over is their mouth at that point. And so to try to seem relevant and in an effort to seem more than you are, they beat their chests, talk about how Texas is scared, talk about how the ball's in Texas's court. I mean, at least they didn't say, we'll never play Texas again. that's over. I mean, I know a lot of Texas fans that are sad to see the fact that the Texas and Texas Tech game is, at least the way it's traditionally been an every single year deal, that's gone. I've been to several games at Jones Stadium, several Texas games at Jones Stadium. And I remember, was it 1998? I sat in the student section. This is how much Tech fans didn't used to care about Texas and didn't have this sort of hate for Texas. Didn't constantly think about Texas the way they do today. I sat in the student section in 1998 at Jones Stadium with a Texas t-shirt on and watched the two Ricky Williamses battle it out. And nobody said a word to me. I went last year with my son, and the second we got off the city bus to walk into the stadium, I had people throwing guns down, horns down, right in my face. Like demonstratively, not like, I mean, we stepped out of our truck at the park and ride to go get on the bus. And the second I shut my door and walked around my truck, someone that was tailgating off, a few rows over, a few spots over, starts hollering at me about Texas sucks. I mean, the game hadn't even started yet. They hadn't even won yet. So that's the difference. It is definitely different. I was there in 2006 when Tech jumped out to a really big lead against Texas. Colt McCoy just kind of methodically brought them back. They end up winning that game. That might have been the game that might have been the game that triggered Texas Tech fans a little bit to hate Texas. A&M was still there. And I still feel like they had the most hate for Texas A&M, but that might have been the start of just the absolute hate for Texas, because Texas Tech jumped on Texas's ass. It was like 21-0. It was early in that game, maybe 6 or 7 minutes into that game. It was 21-0 Texas Tech. Texas couldn't do shit. Texas Tech couldn't not do shit. I mean, it like everything that could go right for them was going right for them, and just the opposite for Texas. And then Texas just battles back, steals that one at the end. I watched students. That was back when the students were in the south end zone of Jones Stadium. And they started ripping up the bleachers and passing them down. And the security guards were just taking these bleachers as they came out of the stands and piling them up off to the side. I was there with my brother-in-law. I said, dude, let's not say shit. Let's just put our head down. Let's just walk out of here. That's what we did. You Tech people, you got to get over this shit. It's over, man. We're moving on. You guys have never been considered our rival. We do not care about Texas Tech. We lose to Texas Tech. It sucks because we lost, not because it was Texas Tech. We beat Texas Tech. It's awesome because we won, not because we beat Texas Tech. And you guys are the exact opposite of that. All right, join us next week. We'll have some more recruiting updates. Corey and Gibson gonna commit tomorrow, so we'll be talking about that one, whether he's at Texas or whether he's Clemson. We'll talk about the other big humans, the defensive line room for 2023. We'll look at the KU matchup in week 5. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can check it out at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. Click on that bell to get all the notifications. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at Horn Takes. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good weekend. We got what, like 6 Saturdays to go till we're kicking it off. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em.